Okay, good day, class. Okay, let's discuss data presentation. So last time we discussed about data collection. No? How do we collect data? It could be from surveys, questionnaires, and whatnots. So after you gather the data, after you collect the data, di ba the next step is you present the data. So how do you present it? Through tables, through graphs. But before that, we must know what kind of data we are dealing with. No? So there are types of numerical data. So first is the nominal scale. Second is ordinal scale, interval scale, and then ratio scale. So these are the four types of numerical data. So dapat kabalo ka mo categorize unsa nga data imong gigather. Okay, so let's first discuss nominal scale. So there is a nominal scale or sometimes it's nominal data po siya. No? It could be called nominal data. The values fall into unordered categories or classes, meaning it doesn't matter kung ang imuhang data kay uh, I mean na-involve siya sa isa ka category no dili siya ga matter kung gao na to nga category or ikaduha siya, it doesn't matter, okay? So data that is used to label variables without providing quantitative value. So in this type of data class, um, it could be qualitative and quantitative. The idea lang sa quantitative is it uses numbers, pero kaning mga numbers wala siya bearing or wala siya value ba? Okay? So this is the simplest form of a scale of measure. So naka-example dire. Example, nakay for example sa inyong area, okay? You want to know how many males there are and how many females there are. So you would want to simplify the data that you're gathering. So you are to assign value. Example, ang male nimo kay 1 and then female 0. But 1 and 0, it doesn't really have a value. Dili ang 0, di ba 0 is the absence of a variable. Okay? Nothing siya. Pero in this case, 0 is not the absence of something. Okay? 0 just indicates nga mo nimong gi-assign for female and then 1 is for male. Example, blood type. Kung naala kay i-assign nimo ang A, B, O ug AB nga blood type as 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? It doesn't mean that AB is higher than A. Okay? So gipang-assign lang nato og numbers ang ato ang mga categories atong data. Okay? So it means class in this kind of data, in the nominal scale, both the order and the magnitude of the numbers are unimportant. Dili siya ga matter, wala siya importance. Okay? So numerical values allow us to use computers to perform complex analysis of the data. So for example, daghan na kay kag data ba? And then dili again, balik taning male o females. For example, 1010 ang imuhang mga type of data nagi-gather, categories, no? Kaya ga-assign mo kag 1 male and then 0 female. So easier siya to manipulate sa computer if na kay gusto i-analyze. Okay? As opposed to having male o female nga word sa imuhang pag-input sa imuhang data ba, kumbaga. But again, the order and the magnitude of the numbers are both unimportant. Okay? So meaning class numbers are just used for the sake of convenience. Example, taas kay imuhang name sa imong category. So you might want to assign a certain number to it. Okay? For convenient purposes. Okay, so for example, natin dire. These are the types of example of nominal scale. No? For example, naka-variable zip code and there are categories 2138, 90210, 1007. So these are the types of zip code. But again, doesn't mean nga kining 90210 dire is greater than the other categories, okay? Political preferences na Republican, Democrat, Independent. Employment status, employed, unemployed. Literary genre na comedy, drama, satire, epic, tragedy. Okay, so these are the examples of a nominal data or a nominal scale. Okay, ato ta karon sa ordinal scale. Okay, so in this type of data class, they are classified into categories just like the nominal data within a variable that have a natural rank order. So ang difference na po niya karon sa nominal is it does have this order. Okay? Meaning, na kay lesser, na kay higher. Okay? Pero, the same with nominal scale, the magnitude of the numbers are still unimportant. Dili gyapon ga matter ang figure or ang value niya. Pero na siya karoy order. Okay? However, na siya order class, but however, distances between the categories are uneven or unknown. Meaning, dili gyud wala ta kabalo kung ang difference sa first o sa second yung category is the same with the difference between the second and the third category. Okay? So, may example ani. Okay, for example, the variable frequency of physical exercise, okay, can be categorized into the following. For example, you are doing, you want to know or you are surveying, no, kinsa ang, how frequent ka physical exercise ang mga students sa USTP. So you would want to create a 5 categories. For example, 1 is never, 2 is rarely, 3 sometimes, 4 often, 5 always. Pero again, do na siya natural order, no? Kani? So, di siya from never to always. Okay? Na siya order. Pero again, ang never to rarely, dito sure kung how, what's the difference between this or equally, ano ba sila? Ang interval nila ba is equal ba from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4? Okay? So, that's why, do na siya rank, again, balik-balik ko, na siya natural rank order. Pero the numbers are not, it doesn't matter ang value. Okay? Unimportant yapon ang magnitude. And also, the distance between categories are not equal or unknown. Okay, example. Kini ang imong variable, language ability. So, ang ordinal values nimo would be beginner, intermediate, and fluent. Okay? Level of agreement, strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, strongly agree. So, nakita ninyo class, nga na siya level ba? Okay? As opposed to your nominal scale. Income level, na lower level income, middle level income, upper level income. Okay? But again, what kabalo? What's the difference between categories? Okay, that's for the ordinal scale. Now, let's go to the interval scale. Okay? So, nakita ninyo ang progress class from the nominal to ordinal to interval. So, sa interval scale class, include na diri ang duha, includes the order and the difference among groups. Now, ang difference sa interval o sa ordinal karon class, mag-add lang ka og equal distances between your adjacent values. So, ang kaning distance class between your categories or between your adjacent values are what we call now the intervals. Okay? Okay, so from nominal, wala siya order, wala siya magnitude. From, and then next, ordinal, na siya order, pero wala gyapon siya value or wala gyapon bearing ang iyang magnitude. And then, pag abot nimo sa interval class, na siya order, and then the difference between or the distances between your adjacent values are equal na, which is called the interval. So, naa na equal interval for each categories. However, in the interval scale class, you have to note that there is no true zero value. Okay, unsa may mga example ani? Okay, natin example diri class. For example, kini nga interval, no, and these are equally spaced nga intervals, no. So, example ang ani is nag-create siya ay nag-measure siya, nag-count siya pila ka buok ang students nga naingani nga SAT scores. For example, 401 to 600, 0. 601 to 800, upat ka buok ang naina ng score, and so on. Okay? So, before we go to the next scale, ganun ningon mo siya nga note 20. Ang example ani class is when you're measuring temperature, for example. Example, you want to measure the temperature of your room for the whole day. Gather kay data na. So, you would want to create categories or intervals, no? For example, from hottest to coldest nga kuan interval. Okay? Pero, may siya no true zero value because when you're measuring Celsius and Fahrenheit, kung naka-zero nga 0 degrees Celsius class nga measurement, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is an absence of temperature, di ba? Dili, ang zero nimo is just another reading sa imong temperature. So, in this case, that's not a true zero value. Okay? So, in the same way po sa imong Fahrenheit, kung 0 degree Fahrenheit, dili gyapon na siya pasabot nga wala kay temperature. Okay? Because The idea of a zero value is wala, di ba? There's nothing, or the absence of a certain variable. Okay. In this case, the zero does not indicate the absence. It's just another value sa imong temperature. Okay. Okay, adto ta karon sa ratio scale. So, ang ratio scale gi class is the most contains the most information ni mga data no. Na kay order, na kay difference, and na kay ratio. And also there is a true zero and equal interval between your neighboring points. So example, and length, area, population. Okay, so again, this contains the most information. So katong mga kulang-kulang sa other types of numerical data class or types of scales, no, naa-diri tanan sa imong ratio. Okay. So, okay, for example, we have body weight. I-compare na to 40 kilograms, 80 kilograms. Ang order ani is pwede maingon nga the first or lesser siya, no? Ang 40, so pwede to indicate nga 1, and then 80 would be 2. So kung naalaki duha ka data ba. And the difference lang duha is you can see 40 kilograms. Okay. And the ratio is 80 over 42 is equal to 2. So that means ang 40 ni mga data class or ang 80 ni mga data is twice your 40 kilograms. So na siya ratio. Balik ko sa mga example sa interval. When you have a temperature, for example, 10 degrees Celsius, and then you have 20 degrees Celsius, that doesn't mean that your 20 degrees Celsius is twice as hot as your 10 degrees Celsius. Okay, isa mo na siya i-prove. Pero kabalota nga, your 40 kilograms, or your 80 kilograms, sorry, is twice heavier than your 40 kilograms. Okay, so muna na siya yung ratio. And kung naa kay value class or data within the ratio scale, bago sa yung definition, you can get a true zero value as opposed to your interval scale na wala kay true zero value. Okay, example, before we get to the example there are two types of data under the ratio scale. It could be discrete or continuous. So when you say discrete, it express only in countable numbers, example, integers. Okay, continuous can potentially take on an infinite number of values. So think of it as digital or analog. Okay, so when kag digital, pwede siya, you could think of it as discrete, di ba? Apple digital test multitester. Okay, ang i-read rin mo rin nga value. Pero in this case, integers man na yung discrete to. Continuous is like an analog multitester. Maagian niya tanang value class. Okay? Okay, example. So, we have these ratio variables here, and then let's identify whether discrete ba siya or continuous. So, number of vehicles owned in the last 10 years. Discrete. Yan naman, dili ka makaingon nga naakay 4.5 number of vehicles owned in the last 10 years. How would you categorize 0.5 na vehicle? Kung half na lang siya, di ba dili? Okay? So, the number of vehicles, kana siya nga kind of data is discrete. Okay, number of people in a household, discrete yapon because dili ka kaingon nga 5.5 number of people. So, unsa man ang 0.5 bata or kung 1.5 dako kay siya. Okay, so dili ka makaingon. So, kini nga type of data is discrete. Number of students who identify as religious, discrete yapon. Okay? So dili gyapon ka categorize of one half student. Okay? Okay, reaction time in a computer task. Kini, it's an example of continuous na data. Years of work experience continuous. So sometimes makain ko, years, pwede ba ka mag prorated ni mga years. For example, 0.5, that's equivalent to half a year. Okay, so that's a continuous type of data. Speed in miles per hour, so continuous gyapon. Okay? Alright, so kung makita na to klase, summarize na to ang atong types of numerical data. And this is actually the 4 levels of measurement, also called nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So muna yung mga difference. Categories sila tanan na categories. Rank order ang nominal ra ang wala. Okay, ordinal na interval and ratio na. Equal spacing ang nominal, ordinal wala. Okay? So interval ratio na. Pero true zero value class, ang ratio scale ra ang na. Okay? So makita na to ang progress sa different levels of measurement, no, as from nominal to ratio. Okay? So let's have this exercise. So you can answer, let me change this one. So you can determine, pwede ninyo i-answer sa inyo seat or while you're listening to this lecture, no? The salary of hospital staff, is it discrete or continuous? Body temperature, is it discrete or continuous? Blood pressure, salary level of government workers, or discrete or continuous? Okay, so that would be the those are the types of numerical data. Okay, so let's go to tables, class. Okay, so after you gather the data, after you present the data, after you categorize on sino siya nga type of data, you will need to present it, no, in a way nga easy to digest or easy to manipulate later on as you create graphs, as you create charts. Okay, so ang pinaka simple nga means, class, of summarizing a set of observation is through a table. Okay, and it can be used for all types of numerical data. So we are going to discuss unsa na to pag tabulate, and then unsa ang mga important computations or baga manipulation sa data, no, through the tabular form. Okay, so we'll discuss frequency distribution, relative frequency, and cumulative relative frequency. Okay, so I think after this mag-discuss ta og graphs sa face-to-face nato nga meeting. Okay, so I have an example here. Before we go to the example, this is a name frequency distribution. Okay, so from the word frequency, class, how frequent, no? Kapila siya nag-occur. Okay, so frequency distribution describes the number of observations for each possible value of a variable. For example, nag-create na kag interval, nag-decide na ka unsa nga interval ang imong buhaton, no, sa imong data nga na-gather. And then for each interval, mangita ka kapila siya ni occur sa imong dataset. So, imo na siyang i-list dito sa imong table. So this is again the number of observations for each possible value of a variable. And then it is depicted using graphs and frequency tables. So before to mag-create a graph, class, syempre mag-tabulate sa tanong. Okay, example. This is the frequency table of the 25 medals Team USA won during the 2022 Winter Olympics. For the gold medal, 8 kabuok. Okay? Silver, 10 kabuok. Bronze, 7 kabuok. Okay? And of course, it should total, imong frequency, class, ang total ana should be the total po sa imong gikuhaan of survey or data. Okay? So in this case, 25 na, of course, imong i-check na ang total para ng frequency must be 25. Okay, another one is, okay, na ako'y tulo ka table dre. It's from the book nga biostatistics nga, again, as I've mentioned before, the last meeting na to nga sa akong masters, no, so mas daghan kay siya for siya mga example kay tailored sa pang medical field, no. So example, table 2.4 may yung frequency table for the cases of Kaposi sarcoma for the first 2,560 AIDS patients reported to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. So ang iyan category lang ani class is yes or no, meaning naa by sarcoma or wala by sarcoma. And then the number of individuals, no, yang gi-count. Okay, again, the total must be kaning 2,560. Second table, this is the frequency distribution of the cigarette consumption per person aged 18 or older sa US during 1900s to 1990. Okay, so pwede sad nimo delay interval since gamay raman po siya class, no? Okay, 1900s, 1910, 1920, okay, isa-isa na niya. And then the number of cigarettes na consumption from 18 years old above, no, so gihap niya 54, 151, and so on. And then the last would be the absolute frequencies of serum cholesterol levels for 1,067 US males aged 25 to 34 years from 1976 to 1980. Okay, so in this case, ang iyahang gihimong category class is not the year, but the cholesterol level. So gi-interval, ga-create siya intervals class with equal spacing, you know, as you can tell. So each interval giihap niya pila ka men aged 25 to 34 years. Ani ang cholesterol level. Okay? And so on. Okay, so of course, again, ang total ana should be 1,067. So that's how you create frequency distribution nga table. So basically, it's very straightforward class. Ihapon na nimo kapila siya ni occur in your data sets. Okay, so unsa man pa itsura if we go back to our different types of numerical data, no? So for nominal data ay nga ni, for example, political preference ang imuhang gi-survey. So Democrat, Republican, Independent sa US man eh. Frequency pila ka buok? 13, sa Republican 9, Independent 5. Okay, so gamay ra siya og date or subject ani class. Okay, ordinal data, siba or ordinal data na siya order. Okay, agreement level, I don't know unsa ni nga kind of data, but we know nga ang imuhang pinakaubos is the disagree and then strongly disagree. Disagree, neither disagree nor agree, agree and strongly agree. So if ihapon pila ka buok, so duha ang strongly disagree, duha ang disagree, 8 ang neither, 13 ang agree, and then 5 ang strongly agree. So this is an example of a frequency distribution for nominal and ordinal. Okay, let's go to interval data. So ako na ning example di ganina during my discussion on interval scale, no? So, muna siya ang frequency distribution table. For ratio data, for example, commute time in minutes. So, of course, pare-pareha ra siya sa interval data, no? Murag, kita rin ninyo nga naka-interval gihapon siya. Okay? And then, measure or count the frequency of each interval. Okay, so kung pwede din ta mag-conclude class pero later na conclusion, pero mas makita nato no ang una na to diretso, the first thing that comes to mind when we have this frequency distribution table is unsa ka ang maximum value, unsa ka minimum value, unsa ka din atong ma-draw nga conclusion from your tables. Okay? So okay, so we have how do we create a frequency distribution table class for discrete or continuous data? So first is we break down the range of values of the observations into a series of distinct non-overlapping intervals. So para lang usually as I've mentioned no, ang pinaka-complete nga scale is the ratio scale. So of course we're dealing with either discrete or continuous data. So how do we create a frequency distribution out of it? For example, data set lang idang naa ka ba? Wala pa ka nag-tabulate. Okay? So first is break down the range of values of the observations into a series of distinct non-overlapping intervals. Kasi pasabot. You create intervals nga imong first interval wala ga-overlap sa second. Okay? Balitaan ni class. If your first interval is 1 to 10, dili ka pwede mag-set of 10 sa imong second interval. The next value gina. Okay? 11 to 20. Okay? If you're counting the frequency na dayon, maglibog makaasa na may ibutang kung nag-overlap na yung mga intervals. Okay? So intervals are constructed so that they all have equal widths of. Before ka mag-create po ng interval, you have to make sure that equal po ang distance between intervals. Dili pwede ang isa 1 to 10, kini kay 11 to 25. Okay, dili na siya equal. Ganun kailangan na siya equal because later on, when we graph, consistent ang atong interval. Okay, consistent atong spacing for each interval. Okay, so after that, upper and lower limits are selected. So natin step-by-step dili class, how to make a grouped frequency table. So the first step is we divide the variable into class intervals. Of course, kung nakay data set, as I've mentioned, mag-create sa kaog, intervals, how do you do that? Pwede random ba? Or pwede ba magbana-bana lang ka? Actually, pwede. Pero if you want to have a more structured process, you can take note of this, no? First is you calculate the range. How do you know the range? Okay? You subtract the lowest value from the highest value. Okay? Pangitaon ni mo kasi pinakagamay, kasi pinakadako. Mo na mong range of values. Okay? Medyo straightforward man self-explanatory man siya. Okay? After you calculate the range class, ato na din i-decide unsa atong width for your class interval. Okay? So, wala gyud firm rule ani class on how to choose the width. You can assume, okay? You can assume a value for your width and that will define how many intervals you will have. Pero if you want to follow a certain rule or the rule of thumb of that is your width will be equal to your range divided by the square root of your sample size. Okay, so manata example na later para mas masabtan ninyo. After makakuha na kag-width din class, you calculate na din that class intervals. So the upper limit, nakita ninyo din, no? So basically, if you have intervals, na kay lower limit, and then na kay upper limit sa imong certain intervals. So in this specific interval, atong lower limit class is 1, and then upper limit na is 10. For the second interval, our lower limit is 11, then upper limit is 20, and so on. So how do you calculate that? Ang first gid mong interval is ang lower limit nimo is the lowest value. Pwede man gyapon class isulod nimo siya mag-create kag um mag-create ka og siguro value lesser than that, pero ang pinaka-wise good is unsa imong lowest value mo na imong first nga lower limit, okay? And then ang upper limit nimo na class interval is of course the sum of the lower limit, okay? And the width nga mo na calculate diri para makabalo ka unsay width sa imuhang specific interval. Okay? Kaya mo naman na siya ang constant yung mga width for each interval na dayon, no? As you progress into your next intervals. Okay, and then after which you create a table, variables versus frequency na dayon. You count how many occurrence of your data set, no, happens or occurs within that interval. And then, mo nang ingon, you count the frequencies na dayon. So, okay, let's have an example. So, a sociologist conducted a survey of 20 adults. She wants to report the frequency distribution of the ages of the survey respondents. So the respondents were the following ages in years: 52, 34, 32, 29, and so on. So there are 20 adults, no? Of course, kung 20, pwede rin naman mano-mano class. Pero if you have larger or daghan kag data set, so you can use Excel to arrange, no, from your lowest to highest or highest to lowest. Okay, para makabulan rin ka sa ano mo siya pag create og interval. So in this case, 20 raman, dali raman na siya. So let's spot class asa ang highest value, asa ang lowest value. So the highest value would be, I guess, 63, and then the lowest would be 19. Okay? Spot nato ni. So tama ba 63? Maning highest na to, and then our lowest would be 19. Para makabalota, unsa di ang range sa age. Okay? Okay. So, mo na tong data set, 63, 19, no, mo na tong na identify nga lowest and highest value. So the range would be again from your highest minus the lowest. So that would be 63 minus 19, that is 44. And then calculating the width same interval, that would be the range, which is 44, divided by the square root of the sample size. Ang sample size nimo is 20. Okay, kung pila ka buok ang imong respondents or subjects. So 20. Okay, so calculating that, we get 9.84, or dili man ka pwede mag-width og 9.84. So ato gyud na siyang round off to the nearest integer niya. So that would be 10. Okay, so maka-create na din ta og class intervals class. As I mentioned, no, ang imong first nga lowest limit, lower limit is the lowest number. So naka 19 nila. Okay? And then plus 10, which is your width, naka 29. Pero, makaingon ta mo, nag-29 lagi siya diri, ma'am. It's because, daw lahi ang iyang pagka-present sa interval class, tanaw lang nimo ang iyahang sign dira. That is lesser. Okay? A less than 29. Okay? So meaning, dili include ang 29. So kung equal na siya, kana, dili na ka pwede mo balik og 29 dire. But in this case, dili man included ang 29 sa imong upper limit. Okay? So, pwede ka mo gamit ang 29 sa imong second nga lower limit. Okay? Para di lang mo malibog class, pwede gyapon ninyo siya buhaton in this case, nga nakaingani. For example, 19 to 29. Kaya ang isa kay 30 na ka magsugod, pwede gyapon na. Wala problema na. Okay, karon lang, nagtanaw lang ta sa iyang way of creating class intervals. Okay? Pero wala sayop gyapon na niya. Okay, so balik ta. 19, no? Your A, ang edad, greater or equal to 19, and then less than 29. So pwede ka mabalik og 29 dire. So plus 10 na po ka, that would be 39 yung upper limit, 39 to 49, and so on. Okay, and then count, pila ka buo. So, gikan na mag-count ka, pila ang nasulod ani nga interval. So, sa first interval is 4. Sa second, 9. Okay? So, meaning, kini din nga interval ang daghan of maximum respondents, kini nga age range. Okay? So, it's very useful to have a frequency table class. Okay, so that's one way of making a frequency table from your group nga group frequency table, sorry. Okay, so let's go to relative frequency distribution. Actually, very related naman siya sa imong frequency distribution table and the cumulative, no? Pero, how is this important or relevant, no? How do we compute the relative frequency distribution? Okay, first is we have to understand unsa man yung relative frequency. Okay, this is the proportion of the total number of observations that appears in that interval. This is useful for comparing sets of data that contain unequal numbers of observations. So for example, ang imuhang distribution is like this. Ang imong frequency is different, no? Unequal siya for different intervals. Okay, so this is very useful ang imong relative frequency distribution because actually you're measuring or you're calculating the percentage, okay, the proportion. Okay, so how do you calculate that? Of course, that would be the number of observations for the ith interval, for that certain interval, divided by the total of number of observations. So very easy, class. You just calculate the percentage. Okay. Okay, let's have this example. So, compare niya class, no, naka-frequency table for ages 25 to 34, pero ga-compare man gud ni siya unsa nga age range ang mas taas o cholesterol level. Okay? So, makita nato mao ni imong frequency. Okay? Kanang wala naka-percent ya class mo na imong frequency, the number of men nga kaniyang edad, and then mao ni imong cholesterol level. Okay, same is true here sa imong second one, group of data, no? So, how do you calculate the relative frequency? Kung nakay 0.4, ako lang nagibutan dire. Of course, that would be your frequency, okay, kanang interval divided by the total. Okay? So, that is 5 divided by 1,227. That is 0.00407, or in percentage, that is 0.4%. Okay? So, if we try to interpret the data here, class, no, based sa percentage, actually, pwede na mata-mata na dyan, pero easier magod sa mata ang percentage because dili na kamabot, for example, tag 1 million lugay na yung, okay, tag 1 million lugay na siya. Di ba daghan kayo sakit kay sa mata? Pero in percentage manggol, it's from 0 to 100% rabi. So, easier po siya, pleasing siya sa mata. Okay? So, makita na to class na as we go higher, ang ato ang actually ang kuana niyahang conclusion ay sorry. Sige. Ang conclusion ani class is that older men tend to have higher serum cholesterol levels than younger men do. Of course, not dili siya be ay true day siya for all cases na higher, no. As you can see class, as we go higher ang imong cholesterol level, ang mga kini gikan diri nga value, kini gikan diri nga value. Padulong pasaka. Okay, as you can see, higher naman yung cholesterol level, no? And then, ages 55 to 64, no, kani nga age group, na ay 37.3% ang naay ing ani nga cholesterol level. As opposed to ages 25 to 34 nga 28%. Though, dili gyapon ta ka exactly kaingon nga mao na siya, no? Because you will have different man ang total numbers, pero it's closely the values are closer to each other man. So, in a way, pwede tayo maka-create of inference or conclusion from this data. Okay? So, paabot nimo sa kining interval class, na higher pa gyud, no? Much higher ang cholesterol level, ang imuhang respondents from 55 to 64 years old, 22.9% ang naay ani nga cholesterol level. As opposed to, katong bata-bata pa nga, 10.8% lang sa group ang naay nga ni nga cholesterol level. Okay, and so on. So, mas, again, easier siya tan-awon or maka-create ka conclusion if you get the relative frequency. Again, pwede naman ka magtanaw sa imong frequency distribution table, no? Pero, mas nindot good if you have a relative frequency ka calculation. Sige, let's go to the last one, which is the cumulative relative frequency. So this is calculated by summing the relative frequencies for the specified interval and all the previous ones. So basically, class, is just like a running total of your relative frequency. So gamit ka po siya in some ways, no? Pero, makita na gamit ani class as we go along, creating a graphs and creating different plots, no? So, kato gikagi kuha lang nato ang kuan class sa katong frequency nga part ato lang gi-retain ang relative frequency. So mao ra gyapon ni siya nga mga values. Pero how do you calculate the cumulative? If the word cumulative, no? So, ang cumulative again is just like a running total sa imong relative frequency. So kini nga value, of course, equal na siya ana kay plus zero man ang previous niya. Then this 15.3 is the sum of 1.2 and 14.1. Okay? 56.7, this is 15.3 plus 41.4, and so on. Okay, hantod sa, of course, maabot yun ka dapat o 100%. So, as you calculate class, kung makita ni mo nga dili ka abot og 100% or ni over ka, meaning accept mo calculation. Okay? And anyways, if nating mga activities or kung homework magani, pwede naman sa mo mag-Excel to verify your answer. And dili man gina masaya kung sakto lang imong pag-input sa formula ba sa imong Excel, maabot gyud ka 100% sa pinaka-last. And dapat gyud 100% na siya kay ang total man gyud sa imong relative frequency class is 100%. Just like ang total sa imong frequency is katong total number of respondents nimo. So, this should be, ang total po nimo must be 100% po siya. Okay, so that's for the cumulative relative frequency, and that is the end of this part sa atong data presentation. So, the second part sa atong data presentation is actually graphing na learning class. So, muna to discuss next face-to-face session natin. Okay, so that would be all. And thank you for listening. And now sa telephone class. Stop recording.